Welcome to the Magic of Positive Thinking, a podcast hosted by Norb Savannasini, founder of AmericanEagle.com, and writer Al Edwards. Norb, fate has brought us together once more.
Every month or so. It's a pleasure, yeah.
It's getting to be a habit.
Yeah, it is. But you got a really nice shirt today. Whoever's not watching Al on YouTube, you should have the pleasure of watching that. I think that style will come back very soon because Al's a trendsetter that cannot be stopped. Yeah.
And friends, if you're listening to this podcast on Spotify or Apple, please go over to YouTube and check out my shirt.
Yeah.
And, it only runs on 2 AA batteries. It's very, very green.
Yes.
It looks red, but it's green.
Yeah, all right.
Well, everyone, it's great to be back with you. We've got hopefully a great show for you today. One of the things that we talk about a lot is people feeling anxious and worried, and I think it's only human nature. And I, of course, like many other people, suffer from that. And Norb talked about a long time ago a book by Dale Carnegie, who was famous for another book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. That was a game changer for a lot of people. Dale Carnegie wrote a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And it was written in 1948. And because the world has changed, but human nature never changes, it's still applicable today. So how'd you get acquainted with that book?
Yeah, actually, I was very fortunate that, without me really being aware of it, my father was very much into those type of books.
Yeah.
And they weren't called positive attitude books. It was just an American way of being.
Right. Not a self-help book.
Yeah.
Nothing like that.
But one of the interesting parts about it is that has never changed. And the book is just a great book. And, one of the sad things about today is that we don't respect old, good American things that were brought up.
Right.
And get a book of the book. It's paperback. You can probably get it for $1 or something.
At a thrift store somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just a great book because the writings are the same. If you read the Bible, it's something that's written 2,000 years ago. A lot of people read it and they love it, rightly so, and other books. But for some reason, these books that were written in the United States are not treasured the same way. And it's a phenomenal book. And I know that Al has a lot of things that he wants to talk about the book. So
yeah. And the irony of life, it seems that if you go to any Goodwill, Salvation Army, any of these thrift stores, I guarantee you, because I've bought multiple copies myself, Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, and every other classic legendary book is there for 75 cents.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to be rich to learn the wisdom of the ages, right?
Yeah.
All right. So basically this book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, is a guide of practical tips and tricks on how to reduce worry in life. And we're going to go over a few of them here, and I want to get Norb's take on some of them here. The first one is live in day-tight compartments. Don't let the past or future overwhelm you. Focus on handling today well instead of mentally carrying yesterday's regrets and tomorrow's fears at the same time.
Yeah, and I think this is typical of all of us, that we have things that we remember, and I think it's a human nature that we remember things that are more unpleasant than pleasant ones.
Right.
And it's like anything else. You have to train your brain to overcome that. Because, what's past is past. You're not going to change it. The only thing you can actually do is have the right attitude for what's going to happen, whether bad or good, because that happens to all of us. You have to be prepared. Yeah, I'm going to have bad days. How am I going to do it? Well, I'm going to start thinking about something good.
Right.
And, one of the things I haven't done today that I always start the show was I thank God for this gift he gives us every day. Today it's a cloudy day in Chicago, but it's a nice day. It's warm, and it's a gift, and we all should be thankful for that. And that sets the day. And I say this in every show. I'm going to keep saying it. You got to start the day positive. You have to program yourself to be positive.
Yeah, and I think that idea, which is not new, but living in today. I mean, we all have insurance and we all think about the future and everything, but all we have is today. And I heard someone say once, let's see, yesterday is history and tomorrow's a mystery.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So if we can do well today and then string those days into weeks and months and years, all we have is today. And let's get through the day.
Yeah. It's. I don't know who said it. I don't know if it was Leo DeRocher, and this has to do with sports. But Leo DeRocher had a great saying. Show me a man who knows how to lose, and I'll show you a loser. and the other thing he said, you can have a habit by losing, and then losing becomes a habit. Or you can have a habit winning, and winning becomes a habit.
Right.
And it applies to being positive. Being positive is a habit. And, Al and I, we saw each other today before, and I don't know what we were talking about. We were laughing like crazy about something really stupid. I don't know what it was. But we came in here, and I think we were basically programming ourselves to be happy and to be positive.
Absolutely.
And it's easy for us to do because we always talk about this, thank God. But please be positive. And before he goes into something else, this actually applies to this. Today we have experts in every field, and nothing is respected unless an expert says it. It's not like when Mark Twain said something that really made a lot of sense, but who was Mark Twain?
Right.
He was just a writer. But here's an interesting thing. This is from an article from the Washington Post, that a lot of studies by John Hopkins and a lot of other psychological universities, they say that in a new study, researchers found that positive psychology intervention. And I love this because this way these guys can get paid a lot of money by, saying
something
think
fancy.
positively.
Yeah.
They say positive psychology interventions, including gratitude exercises, optimism training, and mindfulness-based practices, are associated with consistent improvements in cardiovascular risk factors and health behaviors. And this is really something. Several studies have linked having a sunnier outlook on life to a lower risk of heart disease, stroke, and premature death. In 2021, the American Heart Association released a scientific statement on the mind-heart-body connection, explaining that psychological well-being is an important factor in cardiovascular health. Now, I think a kid in kindergarten would figure that one out.
Right.
But now, thank God, we have these incredibly educated people telling us.
They're even saying it too, yeah.
They're even saying it.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing we've talked about this before that just amazes me and Al, that's incredible. Positive attitude is shown to extend life 6 years. Now, just think if you could buy a pill that would extend your life 6 years. You couldn't keep them in the pharmacy. And you watch TV today, and 90% of the ads are about things to make your life better, better, and better. God only knows what they show because I don't even understand half of them. The only thing I know that I remember is that the last thing they say is, this might cause this and this and this, and
Right.
even death, which I really think is kind of scary. You don't want to take this.
Right.
But just think of this pill you don't have to take. Just think optimistically, you extend your life by 6 years. And now it's proven by experts,
And it's free.
And it's free. It's free. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, that ties right into our second point, in addition to living in today only and not worrying about yesterday or tomorrow. But Norb, you say this all the time. Most worries never happen. Much anxiety comes from imagined catastrophes. Dale Carnegie encouraged using facts instead of emotional assumptions. You've said that 95% of the things you worry about never happen.
Well, and I got that from the book, actually. And it's one of the most interesting things. When you think about, my father was an engineer, and he was a really interesting guy. And he really believed this. He read all these books and everything. But he had, for example, a thing that he always worried about getting a flat. And back then, flats were more common than today.
Yeah, much more common, yeah.
Yeah. But he was always, and whenever he had to go to the airport or go any place, he would take like an extra half hour to fix the flat. But obviously, 99 of 100 times, it didn't happen. But he did worry about having a flat.
That's funny.
Now, I think it was prudent, but we worry about all kinds of things that are not going to happen.
Right, that never materialize.
Yes.
And that's perfect. These kind of work so well together. The next one is, don't sweat the small stuff. Tiny annoyances consume enormous emotional energy. Ask yourself, and this is really the acid test, and we all get caught up in this, will what I'm anxious about right now matter a year from now? And we all know the answer 99% of the time is no.
Well, I think that most of the time it's a week instead of a year.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Because, we worry about things, that just will not happen. I mean, right now it's cloudy. They're predicting a lot of rain here, a lot of hail. And I could start worrying about hail and, oh my God, how am I going to get home and how am I going to get to the car? But, maybe it won't happen. If it does, so what? You
get wet.
Yeah, you get wet. Big deal.
Yeah.
So accept it. And thank God that, right now in the United States, there's a tremendous drought in the western part of the country. And we're lucky enough to have rain and hail, and at least, the corn is going to grow and the wheat's going to grow. And thank God for that,
And I think keeping that bigger perspective is so important because, from time to time, I enjoy walking around historic cemeteries and looking at all the dates and what was going on in these people's lives. And one day I was looking at the expanded view of the cemetery, and it occurred to me, every one of these problems, every one of these people have, makes no difference right now.
Exactly.
It's all done.
It's all done.
It doesn't matter.
And, that's a way to positive think about it too. It's not that important, but by the same token, I'm not saying that you should ignore problems.
Right.
I mean, problems crop up all the time.
But keep the big picture.
Yeah. I mean, and look at the flowers, look at the clouds. And we always talk about how cornball this is, but it's true. And when you get reports like this, that it improves your health. And I'm not talking about also, not only about extending life, but the same incredible educated people that did these studies, these people have less sicknesses. They have a better life. So why not doing, consistency is the key. They said that something we know, Al and I talk about all this time, but these guys obviously are very educated and they're just discovering this. Consistency is the key. And sometimes I think that we have so many educated people in this world that come up with, these incredible, bright discoveries that a kid in kindergarten obviously knows because,
right.
He knows it.
And I think that's the magic of living in today. Most anyone can stop smoking for today. Most anyone could eat more healthfully today.
Yes.
Most anyone could stop whatever or start whatever they want to do just for today. And there's real power and magic in that, I think.
Oh, yeah. And if you can realize that, you can also realize that you can start thinking positively, Think positively. It's hard today. Listen, the news, we talked about this before, the news media is just probably as negative as anything else that there is in today's world. I mean, it's just nothing that says, gee, look how good this is. There's killings here, there's fires here. The two political parties hate each other. They're fighting with each other. And this is going to happen. The economy is going to crash and inflation is worse than what it is. And oh my God. You know what? That's the history of the world. Just read a little history. There hasn't been a period where there haven't been wars and economies fail and other countries, get better. But if you think positively, you can cope with all that. That's why the survival of the fittest, the people that survived had positive attitude that they were going to survive it.
Right.
That's it. It's just that simple.
There was a lady years ago when Jay Leno was doing the Tonight Show after Johnny Carson. He had 100-year-old lady on the show. And he said, of course, what are your secrets? And the first thing she said was, think positive.
Yeah, of course.
How do you like this one? Accept what cannot be changed is a great strategy to stop worrying and start living. Accept what cannot be changed. Fighting reality creates suffering. Energy is better spent adapting and responding constructively. Accept what cannot be changed. Boy, it's a lot easier said than done.
Well, exactly. Winter comes every year. And if you live in the Midwest like we do, you have to prepare for winter. You have to accept it. Most people don't like it because, you have to stay home and it gets dark and you go outside and it's snowing like crazy. You have to shovel the snow. But, you can't change it.
Right.
So don't think of it as something that is awful. No, just that's part of living here. That's
right.
all.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you live in California and you're ready for, fires or earthquakes, I don't see the people walking around saying, oh my God, there's going to be earthquakes. No, they accept the fact that it can happen any day, but they're still enjoying the days.
They're going on with their life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, you have to keep a perspective about that.
I couldn't agree more. And this ties in exactly what you were just talking about. Create enthusiasm deliberately. Act energetic and optimistic even before you fully feel it. Your behavior influences your emotions. And I think that old expression, fake it till you make it, baby, is the way to go on that one.
It's just this thing. If you believe that it's true, it will become true. You have to have a vision. We've talked about this before. And not everybody gets what they want. I mean, but at least if you try, you have that feeling of, well, at least I just didn't give up. I never knew if I could do it or not. So
right.
Go out and do it,
Right. Let me ask you this, though, because a lot of people ask me about this, about positive thinking, and you think it and it comes true. If I go to the restaurant down the street after this, and I truly believe in my heart that Harry Truman's going to join me for dinner that night, and he's been dead since 1972, how does that work as opposed to what I believe works is envisioning something and it coming true? How does that positive thinking, what's the difference there, would you say?
Well, there's a difference between being positive and being an idiot. And, and Harry Truman is dead.
Right.
So you're wishing for something, and I think it's on the book also, that that it can't be done. So, you should have the mental ability of realizing that Harry Truman is not going to show up.
But my point in saying that, though, are that most of the things we think about are attainable. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but,
That's the difference.
God gave us this mind to realize what makes sense and what doesn't.
Right.
Okay. If I want to, if I think that, tomorrow I'm going to get in my car and go really, really fast up a hill so I can reach the moon. I might have a positive attitude that this will happen.
Right.
But, I hopefully I'm smart enough to know that ain't going to happen.
But what people dream about doing are mostly obtainable, and people know themselves that I'm not going to be a ballerina, for example, but there's a whole lot of things I can visualize and think about that I am capable of achieving.
Well, see, I think that you could be a great ballerina because it would be one of the most incredible comedy skits I've ever seen.
Exactly.
So, see, that's a positive way to look at it.
See, I love it.
How do you make yourself a great ballerina? Well, people will laugh. So you'd be a comic and you'd be successful and you are a ballerina.
See, there's the twist on it.
Yeah, right.
But I really do believe if you not limiting yourself, but also knowing what you are capable of, and you visualize something or you live positively or optimistically, it has a huge influence on your life.
Well, yeah. I mean, neither one of us are going to be a center for the Bulls, okay?
Right.
I mean, even if you dream you want to be the center of the Bulls, we're not. We're too old. We're too heavy. We're not tall enough. But that's part of being positive, is to think, what is attainable for me?
Right. Exactly. And not limiting yourself.
Not limiting yourself.
Exactly.
So, those are things that, yeah, maybe, you can imagine yourself being the center of the Bulls and being like Michael Jordan. But by the same token, you realize, well, I can't do that. But what can I do? Can I be a better husband? Can I be a better father? Can I be a better worker? What do I really want to do? Al has written a book. I've written a couple of books. We thought we could do it, and it isn't easy to write a book, and you go through a lot of trial and tribulations and a lot of editing, and you have to pick graphics, and with all sincerity, neither Al or I had any training in that, but at one time we thought, I want to write a book about this subject, and Al did it before me, actually, and I did it, and it wasn't something that it was actually easy, but it wasn't that hard once you start doing it.
Right.
And we're just average people. I mean, we just took that attitude. We're going to write a book.
Right.
And some of the greatest books that are ever written are like flukes, or only one was written. I don't know if Gone with the Wind, did she ever write anything else? I don't know.
I don't know, actually. Mitchell, yeah, I'm not sure.
But she wrote a hell of a book,
Right.
And obviously she was just a regular lady in her home, and she had this idea, and she did it. We all have an incredible potential, unlimited potential. That's a gift from God, and if we don't use it, it's actually like an insult to them. And a lot of people go to church and they study the Bible, they study all kinds of religious books, but the best gift you could give to the Lord is to use your ability to the fullest.
Whatever your talent is.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. And whoever you pray to, it doesn't matter.
I love that. Let me ask you about this, and this is one of the principles in the book as well, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Norb has many great stories in his life about different businesses he's been in, and most of them have been very successful, but he's, like everyone else, he's had his share of clunkers, and you're the first to admit that. How do you deal with criticism? Because one of the principles in the book is don't let criticism destroy you. Criticism often means that you're doing something noticeable or worthwhile. Unfair criticism usually says more about the critic than it does about you.
Well, going back to my dad, he taught me two things. The easiest thing in the world to do, the easiest is to spend money.
Right.
And he used to say, you can give money to a monkey and they figure out how to spend it. Doesn't take any brains to spend money. The second one is to criticize. You can criticize without having any kind of intelligence whatsoever.
Or pedigree of any kind.
Yeah. Just, I don't like your haircut. I don't like your glasses. I don't like, your watch or it's easy to criticize.
Right.
So it's probably one of the most fundamentally weaknesses of mankind. Everybody criticizes. My mother was kind of an interesting gal, and she would see some lady walking, and she'd always find something to criticize. Oh, look how short her dress is, or oh, look at this, and look at that purse. It doesn't belong with her shoes.
Doesn't match, yeah.
The whole thing was to criticize. And instead of saying, gee, this lady, she dresses very nice, and just look for the good thing.
Look for the good, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is true, and so many people have said this, that when you do stretch yourself and try and attain something that you're capable of, and yet it's a stretch for you, ironically, the people closest to you in life that love you the most will be the most critical. So if you really believe in yourself and believe in something, don't listen to them.
Well, unless, there is constructive criticism. I believe in that. That's also being positive.
Mm-hmm.
When you have trust in somebody, I think that if they say, I think you could improve by doing this, and they do it in a positive manner, I think criticism has its, it's like spending money.
Right.
And not just because it's easy to do, there's proper ways to spending money.
Well, and that's very true, but I agree with that. But there's a difference between, hey, I've been down this road before, let me help you, then versus you're a loser, you'll never do that. Those are two different things.
And going back, one of the greatest examples of that is this Thomas Edison when he was a little boy.
Right.
We said this in one of our first shows, and I think it merits repeating it. But when Thomas Edison was in school, he was hard of hearing, and the teacher thought that he was really dumb, and
he was literally cognitively impaired.
The teacher wrote a letter to his mother saying that little Tommy will never be anything, and he will never achieve anything because he's not smart enough. And when his mother read it to Tom Edison, he said, the teacher says that you're a very smart man, very smart boy,
right,
and that someday you're going to do great things. And Thomas Edison never knew about that until his mother passed away, and he found the letter. And that just shows you had this teacher that criticized this little boy, which would have done an incredible amount of harm. And God only knows how much harm is being done to people by telling them stuff like that.
Right, exactly.
And then how incredibly good that the mother had this positive twist by telling them not what the letter said, but what she thought of little Tom.
You can do it.
You can do it.
I believe in you.
And I think that's one of the most incredible stories.
It's a beautiful story.
That always stays with me.
As I said before, it really is a love story, isn't it?
It's a love story. Yeah.
There's no doubt.
And that's why it's nice. And, Al and I talk about this all the time. Be nice to people. Oh, nice to people. It's hard for me to tell Al that shirt's nice. But, I say it because I want him to feel good, I want him to, no, I mean, isn't it more fun to even joke about things
Right.
like that?
Absolutely.
I mean, it makes life livable.
Exactly.
I mean, you go through this life once. God only knows what the hell is it all about. But if you enjoy it, it's fun.
Yeah.
And if you're positive about it, well, it's the old saying, why not be positive? Choose it.
Right.
Why would you want to choose to be miserable?
Right.
Why?
Right.
You're going to live less. I just want to, I couldn't find the study of this thing about the heart, but it's the John School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York.
That's serious stuff.
The connection between mental outlook and heart health works in both biological and behavioral ways.
Yeah.
Now, incredible. Look at it. When people persistently experience stress, emotional strain, or pessimism, the body responds with stress hormones, which surge. Your insulin resistance can rise and inflammation increases.
Yep.
So by not thinking positively, you're beating yourself to death.
Yeah.
Literally, you're beating yourself to death.
Well, it all goes back to the body influences the mind, and the mind influences the body. And I think that, friends, we didn't have time to go through every principle in the book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, but it really is a beautiful book, and we urge you to get a copy of it, listen to it on Audible, whatever you have to do. I really think these simple things we all need to be reminded of. And we hope that a few of these things that we've talked about help you stop worrying and start living better.
Absolutely.
So,
God bless.
Thank you, Norb, as always.
Okay.
Friends, we'll see you next time. For Norb Savanasini, this is Al Edwards, and we'll see you on our next show. Thank you.